Thanks, Irfan. I pay my respects to the traditional owners and thanks, brother, for the welcome. This is and always will be Aboriginal land. My name's Thomas Mayo. Thank you. There we go. It's a bit too tall now. I'm a Torres Strait Islander and I'm born and bred on Larrakia country, so I've travelled all the way from Darwin, Larrakia country, last night, and it's a pleasure to be here with so many good progressive people. Saha Jones organised, set me up to talk to Irfan and come here, and I had a look and I thought, you know, this would be a great place to talk about the Uluru Statement because from what I could tell, the people that would be here, and from what I've seen this afternoon, the people here have big hearts and you care about the country that has always been Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander land, and I think we are going to need you, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and I'll tell you why. My journey, I suppose, begins as a 17-year-old on the wharf. I was a young wharfie, and I worked with some very progressive people there as well, so I got a pretty good education about the need to stand up for yourself, the value of looking after the people that are struggling, you know, not just yourself, using our unity for strength, not just for gaining better conditions for ourselves as wharfies, but also to help in social justice struggles. I was proud to be a wharfie because a guy that I worked with named Brian Manning was one of those wharfies that supported the Gurindji struggle when they walked off the cattle station and fought for equal wages because they were only being paid rations. They were basically slaves, living in a bit of tin, just terrible conditions. And the wharfies threw in money, and Brian, in a rickety old truck, would take the supplies down there and supported that. It was the longest strike in the history of Australia. Our union also supported the push against apartheid in South Africa. Our seafarers led a black banning of any ships that were to take oil over to South Africa to put pressure on. There's many examples like this, the Newkind dispute, where we've walked alongside Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders and others that have needed support for equality. And I was there also on the wharf in 1998 when all of our wharfies around the country were in an ambush in the middle of the night in Zodiac, little rubber ducky, boats. They climbed onto the wharf with balaclavas on and Rottweiler dogs and dragged us from our livelihoods. And that was a long struggle, and we won because of our support for the community. The community came out and supported us. There was international examples of that support, where a ship that was loaded here went over to Canada, and they sent that back and they said, we're not going to unload this ship until it comes back after those guys are back in the gate. And we won that struggle, and it's a lesson of unity. So my point is, I learn about the importance of unity. And not only that as a word, but also unity as in the structure behind it, the discussions, the compromise that you have to have amongst yourselves to be able to walk forward together. I became an official of the union in 2010, and as an official that tradition of supporting social justice struggles continued, and I was able to take some lead in the community. And one of the first things I really got behind was when there was this issue about the WA government were closing down communities in an underhanded way. They were cutting off services, trying to remove our people from their communities that are on country that they've been on for tens of thousands of years. And in Darwin, we're not like Melbourne, we don't have a huge crowd that turns up. We only had a small crowd, so I said, well, we've got to do more. I've got to do more with my expertise, as with my understanding of organising. And we organised the biggest rally that we'd had in Darwin for a long time. I also organised the reaction from the community to the disgraceful treatment of youth at Don Dale, at the detention centre there. We couldn't cop it. We got out on the streets and we stood up and we said, this isn't good enough. Now that struggle continues every day, and I noticed at that time, organising those rallies, that we needed to do better. We needed to do better than what we were doing. We had to get more people on the streets. We were reactive, and that was good timing when I noticed this, because I was invited to a constitutional dialogue, it was called, and I was to be a facilitator of this dialogue. And to do that, I went to a trial dialogue in Melbourne, at Melbourne University. And at this dialogue, the people that were there, I learnt there were going to be 12 dialogues around the country. And each of these dialogues had 5 local facilitators and 2 local co-chairs. And they all came together to give this a trial run. Now, those people that were there, many of them were the elders in the struggle. People like Professor Pat Anderson, Megan Davis, John Christopherson, people that have, the late Sol Belair, wonderful people that you may not have heard about, that have been struggling their whole lives for the rights of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. And when I learnt about what was to come, these 12 dialogues in all parts of the country, with a formula applied, 60% traditional owners, 20% Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander service organisations in the region, 20% Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, that were active, trying to get a balance of stolen generations there, gender balance, and culminating that these meetings, these dialogues, would culminate in a sacred place in the heart of the country, Uluru. When I learned about all that, I stood up in this room, I was nervous, and I said to all these elders, I said, has there ever been an opportunity like this before? Because in my mind, coming from the union movement, this was power building. This was an opportunity for a powerful consensus that we could go out there and really fight for. The answer was no. There hadn't been this well a resourced series of dialogues that culminated in a place like Uluru. I was elected as one of the delegates out of the Darwin dialogue when that happened. And there was, I went and joined all the people that were elected in all those regions for the culmination of all those discussions. And I went there with great hope, because I'd seen that our reactive response to all of these bad decisions needed a better response. We needed to organise something better. And I knew that this was possibly a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And I knew that we were also divided. Our rallies would call for a number of different solutions to one problem. And so I was really hopeful for a consensus that we could go out there and struggle for. Now, Uluru was a high-tension meeting, because you need to understand when I say that, and I always tell people about this tension, that we come from many different places. We come from many different perspectives. We're many First Nations that have our own languages. We've been damaged in different ways. We're at different levels of healing for the genocide that has been perpetrated against us, for the purposeful divisive tactics that have been perpetrated against us. Governments, mining companies, they've purposely divided our people. The broken promises, the heartbreak, all of that came together when we came together in the heart of the country. And on the second day of the 3-day Uluru Convention, around 20 of our people walked out, straight into a media scrum. They said that they weren't allowed to be heard in there. They had their say inside, but they were trying to leverage what they believed in. And that's okay, because we're not homogenous. That is part of a democratic process. But the important thing was that the remainder of the people that were at Uluru, around 250 of 270 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders from all around the country, they remained for the rest of the second day, and they came together on the final morning and they heard the Uluru Statement from the Heart read for the very first time. And it was a moment that I will never forget. It has driven me to travel the country, to fight for the outcomes that it calls for. When the statement was read for the first time, the entire room, 250 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders, stood as one and endorsed it with standing acclamation. Not one person remained seated. It was read once and endorsed the very first time. And when you try and draft a document even with one other person, you know how difficult that is. Can you imagine that? From so many different places, all that tension, endorsed with standing acclamation. And in that moment, you know, I think I was one of the last to stand because I actually worked on trying to build consensus before Uluru. I got in touch with some of those people that had different views and, you know, tried to convince them, you know, this was a great opportunity for us. I looked around the room. I was one of the last to stand up because I was just couldn't believe what was happening around me. And I saw people that had been in passionate debate against each other, with different points of view, embracing each other with tears in their eyes. They were crying tears of joy and hope. It was something that was unforgettable and that's etched in my heart and mind. And Saha, you know, I read it right. Saha's heard me do it twice. The first time it was perfect, but the second time it didn't. I'm going to try and recite the Uluru Statement. And I think you'll see what I mean by the words and what it encapsulates. We gathered at the 2017 National Constitutional Convention, coming from all points of the southern sky, make this statement from the heart. Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander tribes were the first sovereign nations of the Australian continent and its adjacent islands, and possessed it under our own laws and customs. This our ancestors did according to the reckoning of their culture from the creation, according to the common law from time immemorial, and according to science more than 60,000 years ago. This sovereignty is a spiritual notion, the ancestral tie between the land or Mother Nature and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples born therefrom, who remain attached thereto, and must one day return thither to be united with our ancestors. This link is the basis of the ownership of the soil, or better, of sovereignty. It has never been ceded or extinguished, and coexists with the sovereignty of the Crown. How could it be otherwise? That a peoples possess the land for 60 millennia, and this sacred link disappears from world history in merely the last 200 years? With substantive constitutional change and structural reform, we believe this ancient sovereignty can shine through as a fuller expression of Australia's nationhood. Proportionately, we are the most incarcerated people on the planet. We are not an innately criminal people. Our children are alien from their families at unprecedented rates. This cannot be because we have no love for them. And our youth languish in detention in obscene numbers. They should be our hope for the future. These dimensions of our crisis tell plainly the structural nature of our problem. This is a torment of our powerlessness. We seek constitutional change to empower our people and take a rightful place in our own country. When we have power over our own destiny, our children will flourish, they will walk in two worlds, and their culture will be a gift to their country. We call for a First Nations voice enshrined in the Constitution. Makarrata is a culmination of our agenda, the coming together after a struggle. It captures our aspirations for a fair and truthful relationship with the people of Australia and a better future for our children based on justice and self-determination. We seek a Makarrata Commission to supervise a process of agreement making between governments and First Nations and truth-telling about our history. In 1967 we were counted. In 2017 we seek to be heard. We leave base camp and start our trek across this vast country. We invite you to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. That's the Uluru Statement from the heart. Thank you. Those words, they're really powerful. And I wish I could have brought the artwork for you to see, the canvas. After the Uluru Convention, I travelled the country for around 14 months with this canvas in the, it was a couple of joined up postal containers, and with the support of the union, I travelled non-stop, pretty much for 14 months, taking this message out there. And it had to be done because there were no resources behind this. The government pretty much dismissed it straight away. We've had so many aspirational moments, petitions and statements like this. The Barunga Statement, the Yirrkala Bark petitions, even our own people, were like, well, yeah, it was hard to get behind because it's hard to have hope sometimes after so much heartbreak. And I knew we got it right there. I knew that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, and I knew this consensus was really special. And so I had to take it to the people. You'll note that the Uluru Statement is not written to a Prime Minister, it's not written to Parliament, it's not written to a King or Queen like many of our other statements. It's written to the people, and so I had to take it to them, including our own people in the most remote communities. Now, it's a wonderful piece of art. I encourage you to have a look at it if you haven't. Google Uluru Statement from the Heart, and they're compelling words. But what really matters is what it calls for, right? That we change things. The Uluru Statement calls for three things. It calls for voice, treaty, truth. The voice is a constitutionally enshrined voice. And the reason why we say that is because when we're in the dialogues considering the history of our struggle, the other things that we've tried, the other things that we've built and that have been torn down, we realise that if we build this structure of unity, not unity just in word, but a First Nations voice where we decide who our representatives are, which doesn't exist right now on a national basis. If we realise that if we build this, we must protect it. And that is why it's a constitutionally enshrined voice. To protect it, put it in the rule book of the nation. Because the last national representative voice we had was the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Commission. And it had problems, like any organisation does from time to time. And John Howard crossed it out far too easily because it was just legislation and he had the majority in Parliament. So it is the Australian people that must authorise this voice. Now that is a really difficult task. Referendums in this country, only 8 out of 44 have ever been successful. The last one was around 52 years ago, the 1967 referendum that saw my people counted in the census and allowed the federal government to make laws for us. That's a long time, and that's a lot of failed referendums. But I'm really confident that we can win it. Because, not only because I've travelled the country and I've seen the reaction to this when it's explained, but also there's been polls that indicate around 60% of Australians already support this. That's without support in Parliament. That's with the Prime Minister telling lies about it. That is without a resource campaign. So we can win this. It takes people like you to make sure that we can, though. The other things that it calls for is treaty and truth, and that's in the Makarrata Commission. Makarrata is a Yolngu word. It means the coming together after a struggle. It's actually a process. The Makarrata Commission would do the truth-telling, localised truth-telling about what's happened to our people, our families, our clans, our tribes, what the truth of the struggle of our social situation today, and it would also support treaty making. Because I understand as a union official, a treaty is an agreement. A treaty is not the answer alone. We must build leverage, and that's part of what the truth is about. We must organise representation, which is what the Voice does to support the First Nation or First Nations that are negotiating treaty. Because those treaties at the moment are being negotiated with the state, and the Commonwealth has a whole lot of power that we need to be able to negotiate what their obligation is. That's the importance of treaty. And that's why those three things are so important: voice, treaty and truth together. They complement each other. In October in 2017, Malcolm Turnbull, when he was still Prime Minister, dismissed the call for a voice. He did nothing about the treaty and truth. But we didn't take no for an answer. And we've built a people's movement, and I've got to say we have had some success. We haven't succeeded in convincing this government. Who would be surprised about that, right? But the Labor government, they weren't that supportive to begin with, but they've made a commitment that in their first term, if they win election, that they will take this to a referendum to enshrine the voice. And that's the most difficult thing for us to achieve. But Bob Hawke promised treaty, and he broke that promise. The Labor government has let us down plenty of times. And so this people's movement needs to begin now. It can't wait for a referendum campaign. I hope that you'll go to the website www.onevoiceuluru.org, register on there, register your support, so that as we start to take on more actions to really show that there is a strong people's movement behind this, I'll need you to do more than just listen to me and listen to us, but actually act on it and accept that invitation. Thank you.
So I've just been sent up here to personally thank Thomas myself, and on the behalf of everyone, especially from my people and my heart, to you and your people and your heart. Thanks very much for coming down and sharing your awesomeness and your presence. And hopefully we'll cross paths again, no doubt soon.
Thanks, brother.
Good on you, buddy.